Now you might look at this bike and write it off as like a little simple learner-friendly sports bike, but KTM have made some big updates to the RC390 for 2022. Now I've been riding it on the road for the past couple of weeks and I've found it surprisingly feature-laden for a small capacity bike, and so in this video I'm going to go through my 10 favourite features. But before we get started, a massive thanks to Beeline Moto for sponsoring the channel. If you want to add like navigation capabilities to a small simple bike like this, then there's no easier way to do it. The Beeline Moto fits on almost any bike and it's got a brilliant, simple, easy to use app with excellent route planning. Personally, I use it on pretty much all of my rides, and so there are links down in the description where you can find out more. Now, unfortunately, we're going to have to start with some bad news, and that's that the RC390 has gained probably 5 or 6 kilograms versus the previous generation. That is for the total weight of the bike though, and KTM have sought to improve the handling and suspension response by looking at some specific components. So first up, the wheels, there's 3.4 kilograms saved between the front and rear, and not only is a reduction in rotating mass going to help with changes in direction, but also it's unsprung mass, so that's going to allow the suspension to respond quicker and easier. Same for the braking system, so there's nearly a kilogram saved there as well, and some of that will be rotating and unsprung. And while we're at it, I found the braking to be really good on this bike. It's ByBra, which is a budget sub-brand of Brembo, but it's still got that sporty radial caliper there on the front, and I found the braking power to be absolutely ample for a little bike like this. Now you also get a completely new fork on this bike. It's a 43mm upside down fork, courtesy of WP, their in-house suspension brand. And the new thing here is it's got a split functionality open cartridge design that they say allows for a massive range of adjustment. So on the left fork leg here, we've got a compression adjuster with 30 clicks and also 30 clicks of rebound on the right hand leg. And the idea with this is that you can have it nice and soft for road riding, but also really firm it up if you do want to take it to the track. Now normally with smaller capacity bikes like this, you're used to the suspension feeling a little bit budget, but the ride quality on this bike is far superior to what I'd expect. Plus you've got these little thumb twiddlers that you can make changes to without tools, and so that means it's really easy and quick to do, and you can even do it while you're on the road. At the rear we've still got a WP shock, and that gets 5 steps of rebound and preload, so you can jack it up if you do wish to carry a passenger. Now in this very nicely designed cockpit, we've now got a full color TFT dash. Not only has it got great visibility, it's got automatic dimming, so it has a light sensor to make sure that it's not too bright at night but plenty bright enough in the day. But there's plenty of readouts like trip meters and stuff. You can also play with all the bike settings, and then finally you can connect to the KTM MyRide app, and that allows you to control music and calls through the switchgear. Massively impressive for a bike of this stature and price point, and it gives you a little bit of a flavor of the TFT dashes of their bigger, more premium bikes, just with a bit less screen space and functionality. Now through that screen you can manage the rider aids, of which there's quite an impressive suite. So it now gets a 3-axis inertial measurement unit that feeds lean data back to the bike, and that enables cornering sensitive traction control and cornering sensitive ABS. Now you could argue, do you really need loads of rider aids on a 43 horsepower bike? But personally I'd rather have them than not, especially if you can switch them off. Another cool feature that it gets is their Supermoto ABS, and what that does is disables the ABS on the back wheel so you can slide it. It also allows the rear wheel to lift so that you can brake harder into corners, and then it disables some of the cornering sensitive functionality. Plus you've now got the option of a quick shifter accessory that goes up and down the box, and so combined with that TFT dash, you've got a suite of tech there that's absolutely unmatched in this segment of the market and really does give you the feel of what you'd normally find on a bigger bike. Lighting is updated for 2022 as well, so there's a new LED headlight that they say is more powerful and gives you a wider spread of light. It's flanked by a couple of daytime running lights, so obviously they're going to make you more visible to other road users, but I think it gives the front end a little bit more personality as well. And then they've actually integrated the indicators into the fairing there. So whip off these aero mirrors and you've got a very clean and streamlined looking front end for track days. At the back, there's a really cool looking new tail light, very slim. And then the KTM press garage have fitted these sort of micro indicators at the rear from the accessories catalog. They look really cool, absolutely tiny. And again, it just gives the back end that very clean look. Now, the bodywork has had a major redesign for this year as well. And they say they use CFD or computational fluid dynamics, which is effectively like a virtual wind tunnel. So some of the benefits for this year, they say, are improved wind and weather protection, but also they've used these panels on the side to direct hot air away from the rider to keep you cool in hotter weather. Now, the press garage for KTM is like 2.5 hours from here, so always picking up these bikes. I get a good run right at the beginning, and I found this surprisingly comfortable. I mean, it is a relatively small bike in sort of physical terms, but it's not that narrow at the front, so you can tuck in behind the fairing, and also you've got a nice bubble in the screen here, so it seems to push the air, you know, up around here if I'm sat up. But if I tuck in on the motorway, for example, the majority of the airflow is going over my head. I genuinely found it a lot more comfortable than I expected. Now, the bodywork gets 2 new paint jobs for this year. So we've got the typical for KTM blue and orange here, and then the other option is pretty typical for KTM as well. That's orange with a little bit of black. Personally, I think I'd go for this one. It just looks that little bit more sporty to me, but let me know which one you'd pick down in the comments below. Now, another visual change is that they've slimmed down the back end here with a new slimmer looking steel trellis subframe, and I've just noticed that it's now bolted on, and I think the previous gen was welded. So if you did have a spill, which is fairly likely on the track, and you bent the subframe, now you'd just be able to swap it out by bolting a new one on instead of replacing the whole frame, which would be majorly expensive. Ergonomically, it gets a few tweaks for 2022 as well. So they say they've made it narrower in the knee area, so it gives you a bigger surface area to grip onto with your knees. And that's at the same time as making the fuel tank bigger. So it's 13.7 litres now, as opposed to the 10 litres on the previous gen. A little bit more range, which is always a good thing. And they say they've also played with the weight distribution a bit as well. And there's also a new seat and pillion seat, which they say has a little more padding for some extra comfort over distance. The seat height now sits at 824mm, whereas the previous gen was 820, so not a massive difference. It's still pretty accessible, and possibly that slight difference is just down to the extra padding. We've also got new clip-on bars. I believe they've been moved forward by 10mm to give you a little bit more space, but also they're adjustable by 10mm up and down, and then you've got adjustable brake and clutch levers as standard. So a nice bit of customization available there, and generally I think it's a pretty comfy bike. Not super aggressive. You can see that it's not extremely low on the clip-ons, and for me it's right in that sweet spot of comfy enough to ride on the road for a couple of hours at a time, but also you can get nice and low at the front, and when you do get super low, it really does increase the sensation of speed even on a 43 horsepower bike. Speaking of which, they had to update the engine a little bit because of the new Euro 5 emissions regulations, and part of that was fitting a 40% bigger airbox. There's also a new exhaust system, which is a little lighter, but I'm sure there's some emission stuff going on there as well, and a new engine mapping, which they say is a little smoother. But the combined result is that while peak power stays the same at 43 horses, the extra airflow in the airbox helps to generate more torque, and so now you get 2 Newton meters more at its peak. Not, you know, groundbreaking, earth-shattering stuff, but obviously more's better, so you'd take it. Price-wise, I'm pretty impressed by this bike. We don't have loads of options in the UK in this sort of part of the market. We don't get the Ninja 400, for example, but there is the Yamaha R3, and so that probably serves as its closest competitor and best benchmark. Now, that bike does get a twin-cylinder engine, so it's going to feel a little more refined, and that might be preferable to some riders, but in almost every other area, in terms of tech, hardware and equipment, and also those performance figures, both the power and torque, you know, this outdoes the Yamaha easily. And at the same time, it's a few £100 cheaper, so I think it looks like really good value, and probably part of how they've done that is that all of the 390 KTMs and below are produced in India by Bajaj. I will say though, if you're worried that it's going to feel a little bit budget, I don't think it really does. There's plenty of attention to detail with the finish. The switchgear and stuff feels nicely put together. And so all in, certainly versus that bike, it looks like pretty good value. This is such a fun little bike for the road, and as always, I'd love to know what you think of it down in the comments below. And if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, then hit subscribe and I'll catch you in the next one.